cane toads. Most of Aussies would be pretty horrified seeing me holding these guys. They are probably the most disliked animal in Australia, unless of course you're a Queensland NRL fan like myself. But all jokes aside, I want to talk about biocontrol, biodiversity threats, and range expansion. And these guys are a cracking example for all three topics. Biocontrol is the use of living organisms to control or regulate pest populations. For example, introducing a pest species' natural enemy to an area where the pest is found. In this case, the pest species are actually native beetles that like to feed on sugarcane, which incidentally is not native to Australia but is listed as an economically important plant. Long story short, cane farmers were really struggling with these native beetles decimating their crops. So the sugar industry at the time took inspiration from a successful biocontrol of the invasive prickly pear. So they imported a breeding population of cane toads from Hawaii with the intent to release them in the worst affected areas in far north Queensland, which is where I live, why it's easier for me to find these guys. There is a lot more history to the story, which I won't go into right now, but if you're interested in hearing more, let me know in the comments. So basically the biocontrol attempt failed in that they did not actually control the beetle population that they were supposed to. But more than that, they thrived in Australia's northern coastal areas, which normally wouldn't be a problem if you were a regular amphibian. However, these guys are toxic to eat in their whole life cycle. So if you have a look here, they've got poison glands on their back, just in these spots here. Therefore, it lacked predators to control their population. Australian native wildlife trying to eat these guys, either their eggs, tadpoles, toadlets, or toads, would often get sick and die. And they also outcompete native wildlife for food and shelter, which leads me to biodiversity threats and range expansion. So biodiversity is a short word for biological diversity, which is the variety of all living things and their interactions. Now, scientists break it down into three main levels. Genetic diversity, which is within the actual individual, species diversity, and ecological diversity. There are three main threats to biodiversity: habitat destruction, overexploitation, and introduced species. So an introduced species or an exotic species is an organism that's been moved from its geographical location to a new area. These guys are actually native to Central and South America originally. Range expansion is a type of dispersal. Dispersal is the movement of an individual away from their area of origin. And we often see range expansion in animals or plants that are considered invasive species. In the first 20 years of these guys being released into far north Queensland, they only expanded their range by 10 kilometres per year. From then, it began to increase to 40 to 60 kilometres per year. There are a few contributing factors that have allowed the cane toad to expand their range so rapidly. And the interesting thing is that scientists have found that evolutionary forces are at play. And traits like behaviour, body shape, and dispersal ability are passed directly onto the offspring. Toads at the edge of their range actually have longer legs and more endurance than toads in the older populations. They are so successful at expanding their range that they can now be found in the Northern Territory, Western Australia, and New South Wales. Unfortunately, there aren't any broad-scale ways to control these guys. However, it isn't all doom and gloom. Our clever native wildlife have adapted to the now established presence of the cane toad and are learning ways to safely eat the toads, learning to avoid them, and in some cases they've actually been seen to tolerate their toxin after eating them. The toads do still outcompete our native wildlife for food and shelter though, so small-scale local efforts should still be made to help reduce the cane toad population. If you would like some tips on how to reduce the population, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.